The personified Vedas thus worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead in different ways. Offering worship to the Supreme Lord by praying means remembering his transcendental qualities, pastimes, and activities. But the Lord's pastimes and qualities are unlimited. It is not possible for us to remember all the qualities of the Lord. Therefore, the personified Vedas worshipped to the best of their ability, and at the end, they spoke as follows. Dear Lord, although Lord Brahma, the predominating deity of the highest planet, Brahma Loka, and King Indra, the predominating demigod of the heavenly planets, as well as the predominating deities of such planets as the sun and the moon, are all very confidential directors of this material world. They have very little knowledge about you. Then what can ordinary human beings and mental speculators know of you? It is not possible for anyone to enumerate the unlimited transcendental qualities of your lordship. No one, not even the mental speculators and the demigods in the higher planetary systems, is actually able to estimate the length and breadth of your form and characteristics. We think that even your lordship does not have complete knowledge of your transcendental qualities. The reason is that you are unlimited. Although it is not befitting to say that you do not know yourself, it is practical to understand that because you have unlimited qualities and energies, and because your knowledge is also unlimited, there is unlimited competition between your knowledge and your expansion of energies. The idea is that because God and his knowledge are both unlimited, as soon as God is cognizant of some of his energies, he perceives that he has still more energies. In this way, both his energies and his knowledge increase. Because both of them are unlimited, there is no end to the energies and no end to the knowledge with which to understand the energies. God is undoubtedly omniscient. But the personified Vedas say that even God himself does not know the full extent of his energies. This does not mean that God is not omniscient. When an actual fact is unknown to a certain person, this is called ignorance or lack of knowledge. This is not applicable to God, however, because he knows himself perfectly. But still, as his energies and activities increase, he also increases his knowledge to understand them. Both are increasing unlimitedly, and there is no end to it. In that sense, it can be said that even God himself does not know the limit of his energies and qualities. How God is unlimited in his expansion of energies and activities can be roughly calculated by any sane and sober living entity. It is said in the Vedic literature that innumerable universes issue forth when Mahavishnu exhales in his Yoga Nidra, and that innumerable universes enter his body when he inhales. We have to imagine that these universes, which according to our limited knowledge are expanded unlimitedly, are so great that the gross and subtle ingredients, the 5 elements of the cosmic manifestation, namely earth, water, fire, air, and sky, along with the total material energy and false ego, are not only within the universe, but cover the universe in 7 layers, each layer 10 times bigger than the previous one. In this way, each and every universe is very securely packed, and there are numberless universes. All these universes float within the innumerable pores of the transcendental body of Mahavishnu. It is stated that just as the atoms and particles of dust are floating within the air, along with the birds and their number cannot be calculated, so innumerable universes are floating within the pores of the transcendental body of the Lord. For this reason, the Vedas say that God is beyond the grasp of our knowledge. Avan manasa gochara. To understand the length and breadth of God, is beyond the jurisdiction of our mental speculation. Therefore, a person who is actually learned and sane does not claim to be God, but tries to understand God, making distinctions between spirit and matter. By such careful discrimination, one can clearly understand that the Supreme Soul is transcendental to both the superior and inferior energies, although he has a direct connection with both. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna explains that although everything is resting on his energy, he is different or separate from the energy. Nature and the living entities are sometimes designated as Prakriti and Purusha, respectively. The whole cosmic manifestation is an amalgamation of Prakriti and Purusha. Nature is the ingredient cause, and the living entities are the effective cause. These two causes combine together, and the effect is this cosmic manifestation. When one is fortunate enough to come to the right conclusion about this cosmic manifestation and everything going on within it, he knows it to be caused directly and indirectly by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. It is concluded in the Brahma Samhita, therefore, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchinanda Vigraha Anadhir Adhir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. After much deliberation and consideration, when one has attained the perfection of knowledge, one comes to the conclusion that Krishna, or God, is the original cause of all causes. Instead of speculating about the measurement of God, whether he is so long or so wide, or falsely philosophizing, one should come to the conclusion of the Brahma Samhita. Krishna, or God, is Sarva Karana Karanam, the cause of all causes. That is the perfection of knowledge.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Shayam Rupakadam Mahyam Tadhati Shapadantikam Pandehang Shri Guru Shri Dvitapadakamalang Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Shahagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Shahagana Lolita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prashabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vansha Kolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Sarva Karana Karanam. Krishna is the cause of all causes. He's the cause of the material elements and the cause of the living entities who manipulate the material elements. The Prakriti, or the material nature, and Purusha, the living entities. But behind both of them is the personality of Godhead. Prabhupada gives the example of in making a pot, the clay is the immediate cause of the pot, and then there's the potter's wheel. But behind the potter's wheel and behind the clay is the potter. You can say that the clay is the cause of the pot, or you can say that the wheel is the cause of the pot. But the potter has to be there as the final cause. So one might say that matter is the cause of everything, or one might say that the combination of matter and the living entities. But finally, it's the cause of all causes, Krishna. And therefore, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Gyanavan Mam Prapadyate. When one comes to the perfection of knowledge, one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At this point, we've reached the end of the actual prayers offered by the personified Vedas, and the rest is wrap up, as we might say. We're concluding the narration. Any questions or comments so far? Yes, we'll see.
Thank you, Maharaj. In the beginning of the chapter, basically there is a question how through material sound can be understood the transcendence. Can you please explain it with more simple words?
Well, it really it's interesting. To be honest, I've never fully understood how the content of these elaborate prayers directly answers that question. Is this syncing? I think it is. There's a lot said here, and it seems to go far beyond the scope of that initial question. But the question seems answered early on, that on his own strength, the living entity can't describe the absolute truth. But by the mercy of the absolute truth, he can reveal himself. Sevan Mukhehi Jivado. The Lord is abang manasagochara, beyond the range of the mind and beyond the range of words that emanate from mundane speculative powers. But he can reveal himself, and he can employ or enable material nature to be employed in his glorification. We're using Prabhupada's example, the microphone, to glorify Krishna, although it's a material thing. Or we're using books and paper and so on, or digital media, all material energies, but they're being used to glorify the Lord because they're originally energies of the Lord. From that point of view, they're spiritual energy. They're just covered by the cloud of Maya. When that cloud of Maya is removed, then everything is spiritual. Sarva Kalavidam Brahma. Is that okay?
So basically, although words material, initially they are meant to describe Krishna.
They're all meant to describe Krishna. Earlier we read in the section on Vasudev performing sacrifices and hearing instructions from the sages, that the words used to distinguish one thing from another are nothing but Krishna. words used to distinguish one thing from another thing are ultimately nothing but Krishna. So Krishna's presence everywhere and in everything. So everything can be used to glorify Krishna. What is that in Bhagavad Gita? Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagno, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaivatena Gantavya, Brahmakarma Samadhi. Everything is in a sacrifice is Brahma. The offering is Brahma. The ghee offered in the fire is Brahma. The fire itself is Brahma. Everything is Brahma. And when it's offered to the personality of Godhead, it revives its spiritual qualities. Brahma Karma Samadhi. Prabhupada says it all merges in transcendence. So when words are used to glorify Krishna by revelation, words coming from Krishna himself, and those words have spiritual power. Is that okay?
I also wanted to ask Maharaj, so we have the prayers of the personified Vedas. Generally, we don't think the Vedas are personalities.
Personified. Let me go back a little bit before we come to that. Prabhupada frames that question of how words can glorify Krishna or glorify the absolute truth by saying that really this is a question about personalism or impersonalism. And so why is that? If we take the impersonal view, then there's nothing to glorify. In the Katha Upanishad, it said that and many places, similar statements are made in the Upanishads that the Lord is Ashabdam, Aghantacha, Arupam. He has no form, Nirgunam, he has no qualities, he has no this, he has no that. So if we take these statements absolutely, what is there to talk about? Any words would be essentially Maya. Any words used to glorify qualities or forms, and so they don't know that can't be spiritual, or that can't be ultimately true, because the Absolute has no form, has no qualities, has no name. So your mundane sounds talking about name and form and qualities can't truly glorify the Absolute Truth. But if the Absolute Truth has transcendental form, qualities, name, pastimes, and so on, then now the talking can begin. We can speak unlimitedly about the Absolute Truth. So from that point of view, Prabhupada frames this as a debate, or debate's good enough. A contest over whether the Absolute Truth is personal or impersonal. And the conclusion, of course, is that the Absolute Truth is ultimately the personality of God. Okay? Now then, we usually don't think of the Vedas as being personified, but here they are, personified. Prabhupada, in giving direction for the painting for this chapter, I believe he said they should be depicted like young sages. We find that so many, the Bhudevi, the earth is personified, the various potencies of the Lord surround Narayan, and so on. So they can be taken, so they appear as great sages, the Vedas personified. In Brihad Bhagavatamrita, there's an incident where Lord Brahma in his court calls all the Shastras together, and they all come personified. And the Upanishads are hanging back. They're sort of giving their usual discourse about the absolute truth being unknowable and inconceivable and beyond words and so on. And the different Puranas are talking about this demigod and that demigod. And none of the Shastras are right out and straight out glorifying the personality of Godhead. And Srimad Bhagavatam becomes so exasperated that the Bhagavatam walks out of the assembly.
It's interesting if all these books actually, or whether they are personalities, who is the person behind Srimad Bhagavatam?
And Bhagavatam is, of course, that's, I don't know that how we should take that depiction, but by Sanatana Goswami, but he takes it that that the Bhagavatam is personified, or that all of these Shastras are personified, and therefore this discussion takes place, whether that's intended as a poetical device or whether it's meant to say that there are actual persons of some sort. I'd leave that up to you to decide. Anything else? Okay. Oh.
Hare Krishna. I'd like to ask, what's the benefit of chanting syllable Om in this age?
Okay. Om Tat Saditi Nirdesho Brahmanas Trividha Smitaha Brahmanas Tena Vedascha Yagyascha Vita Buddha Tasmadom Mityudaritya Yagyada. The Om is the symbolic representation of the absolute truth. So just as we're chanting Hare Krishna, one can also chant Om. Om, elsewhere it's said, Abedam Pavitram Omkara. I'm also Omkar. And elsewhere, in several places in the Bhagavad Gita, Tasmad Om Ityudaritya Yagyadana Tapakriya Dana Chabivita Dana Kriya Stripivita, like that. So Om represents the absolute truth. And therefore, you can't chant Vedic mantras without Om. Om Tat Sat, Om Tat Vishnu, Paramam Sat Padam Sada Pashanti Suraya, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate. So Om is always there, representing the personality of Godhead. But Om, Prabhupada said, is impersonal. Sages are chanting Om, Om, but who are they chanting to? Could be this, could be that. That sage was there. Datta, what is his name? Atri Muni. He was meditating, may the Lord of the universe be pleased to appear before me, because he wanted to have the Lord as his son. So he was doing severe tapasya and praying that the Lord of the universe appear before him. And so, being pleased with his austerities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva all appeared. So the sage was overjoyed, and he'd been standing on one leg doing tapasya, so now he ran over to where the three deities were and prostrated himself. But he asked them, which of you did I call for? It wasn't clear. to him. From one angle of vision, Brahma's the Lord of the universe because he creates it, or Vishnu because he maintains it, or Lord Shiva because he destroys it. So the three deities said, don't worry, we'll all appear together as your son, Dattatreya. So people are chanting. Om sort of affords them the opportunity to chant without deciding upon a particular personality as the object of their meditation or worship. So Om, Prabhupada said, is impersonal, and he gave the example. Therefore, Prabhupada disapproved of all these pictures where Radha and Krishna are present in an Omkar, or Krishna is in the sky surrounded by an Omkar. He considered these impersonal, as if Krishna were an emanation from the impersonal syllable Om. So Prabhupada gave an example that, like in a press conference, we address the President of the United States, Mr. President, and then we ask our question. So Mr. President is more or less impersonal. Is it George Bush Sr.? Is it George Bush Jr.? Is it Biden? Is it whoever, Ford way back, or Nixon back further, or who is this Mr. President? But among his friends, it's, if we get more personal, Mr. Biden, or still more personal, Joe, then it's no longer just a post. Mr. President is the post. I might hold that post, you might hold that post. But Mr. Biden, now that's a specific person. So Om is generic or impersonal, and Krishna is the personal name of God. So the personalists prefer the names of the Lord, Krishna, Rama, Vishnu, Shringa. And the impersonalists prefer to chant Om. Is that okay? Something else? Yes.
Raj, that the text describes how Krishna is unlimited. There's unlimited energies, and there's things that even he doesn't know about. And is it like if he does something and then he's like, "Oh, I didn't know I could do that"? Or
Prabhupada explains this. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains this in the fourth, in the Adi Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita, fourth chapter, I think, in regard to Srimati Radharani, who's the Ladini energy of Krishna. And it describes how there's competition between Krishna and Srimati Radharani and the gopis, who are also expansions of Ladini Shakti. The gopis try to please Krishna, and Krishna becomes pleased. And then because Krishna is pleased, this thing is just not going to stand where it's supposed to. Anyway, because Krishna is pleased, now the gopis become more pleased. Because the gopis are more pleased, Krishna becomes more pleased. So there's this competition between Krishna and his energies. Similarly, in some way, Krishna expands his energies, and then he expands his knowledge potency to understand his energies. But then the energies expand again, and then the knowledge potency expands again. So it's not static. It's dynamic. Although Krishna is absolute, although he's supreme, although he's supreme, he's ever expanding. He's not static. Is that okay?
When we think of expansion in this world, it is always that you're expanding according or in relationship to something else. So you can measure that it is actually expanding, becoming bigger. But Krishna seems to be expanding within himself.
Now, there are two things here. That when we talk in the material world, expanding means in some measurable way, but Krishna is expanding within himself. So one thing is that we're using this word, Prabhupada used this word, expansions. And words always have their limitations, because we think of expansion like the way a balloon expands or something, and it's now 10% bigger, or the way a corporation expands, or a rubber band expands. We think of expansion within certain familiar contexts. So Krishna's not expanding like a balloon or a rubber band or an American corporation. He's expanding just as Krishna expands as Balaram. So it's not that Krishna somehow got bigger, but that Krishna manifested some aspect of his personality, and we call that an expansion. Just as Prabhupada elsewhere he says the son is an expansion of the father, or an expansion of the parents. So how is that? What does that mean? You have to understand it contextually. It's not getting fatter or something like that. But there is what would you say? There's more now. So of course Krishna is complete, but he can show more, or he can manifest more of his personality, of his energies, of his pastimes. Is that okay?
Could we see it as a sort of fractal?
Excuse me?
Could we imagine that as a sort of fractal going more and more deeper?
Can we imagine that it's a sort of fractal? I guess you can imagine whatever we can imagine whatever we want. It's not described by the Shastras as being like a fractal. And the fractals, of course, I think are mathematically determined. There's some sort of mathematical equations or what have you, algorithms by which fractals expand in a particular mathematically defined way. So Krishna doesn't expand himself that way, according to mathematical formulas specified by some code writer. So I don't know how apt the image is. In the Brahma Samhita, the image is given of a candle, at least for the Swamsa expansions, the plenary expansions. Deeparchareva hidashantaram abhyupecha deepayate vidahetu samanadar. One candle lights another candle, lights another candle. So in this way, all the candles are expansions of the original candle. That example is Shastric. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Thus, the Veda Shtuti, or the prayers offered by the personified Vedas to Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, were first narrated in a disciplic succession by Sanandana to his brothers, all of whom were born of Brahma at the beginning of the universe. The 4 Kumaras were the firstborn sons of Brahma. Therefore, they are known as Purva Jata. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita that the Parampara system, or the disciplic succession, begins with Krishna himself. Similarly, here, in the prayers of the personified Vedas, it is to be understood that the Parampara system begins with the personality of Godhead, Narayana Rishi. We should remember that this Veda Shruti is narrated by the Kumara Sanandana, and the narration is repeated by Narayana Rishi in Badarika Sharam. Narayan Rishi is the incarnation of Krishna for showing us the path of self-realization by undergoing severe austerities. In this age, Lord Chaitanya demonstrated the path of pure devotional service by putting himself in the role of a pure devotee. Similarly, in the past, Lord Narayan Rishi was an incarnation of Krishna who performed severe austerities in the Himalayan ranges. Shri Narad Muni was hearing from him. So in this statement given by Narayana Rishi to Narad Muni, as narrated by Kumara Sanandana in the form of the Veda Stuti, it is understood that God is the one supreme and that all others are his servants.
As we mentioned at the beginning, the Bhagavatam typically has discourses within discourses within discourses. So we're hearing Vyasadeva telling about what Sutta Goswami told the sages of Naimisharanya, and he's telling about the conversation between Parikshit and Shukadev Goswami, and Sukadev Goswami is telling about conversation, for example, between Vidura and Maitreya, and Vidura is telling about further, Maitreya rather is telling about further conversations that took place. So you get quotes within quotes within quotes within quotes. In the Parampara system, we receive knowledge in this way, coming down from one authority to the next to the next. And the conclusion here given is that only Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and everyone else is Krishna's servant.
In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is stated, Ekala Ishvara Krishna. Krishna is the only Supreme God. Ara Sabha Britya. All the others are his servants. Yare Yache Nachaya Se Taiche Kara Kare Nitya. The Supreme Lord, as he desires, is engaging all the living entities in different activities, and thus they exhibit their different talents and tendencies.
Ekali Ishvara Krishna Arsabritya. There's only one Supreme Controller, and everyone else is a servant of that controller, Krishna. And Jare Joiche Nachai She Toiche Korinutyo. As they're all dancing, all living entities are as if dancing by the direction of Krishna.
Maharaj, like how we understand this, because when Krishna is expanding, like as Balram or different expansions, so they all are servant of Krishna. But thing is, like the person has some qualities, and he expand. So like they should have also same qualities and same nature, because like Krishna himself is Lord. He's not servant of nothing. So like other persons, like other expansions, they are servant. So how do we understand this? Because Krishna
your father expands, and you're the son, so you're the expansion. But that doesn't make you identical to the father, and nor does it make you the father. You're the son. So you could say, well, that's the difference. Your father has the quality of being father, and you have the quality of being son. So if you're an expansion of the father, why don't you have the quality of being the father? But no, you have the quality of being the son. So what's the difficulty? Krishna has different kinds of expansions also. Swamsa expansions have the quality of being identical with the Lord, being the controller and enjoyer. And the Vibhanamsha expansions have the quality of being tiny. So there are different types of expansions also, many different types actually. But it's not necessary that the expansion has to be identical. We were discussing that one candle expands as another candle. Then they're all identical. So, but it's not that that's the only kind of expansion. That's the Swamsa expansion. The plenary portions of Krishna are all, in one sense, identical. But the living entities are also expansions. They're the separated expansions.
So many things coming from one person. So different we call different nature or different how
the sun is expanding as sunshine. The sun is expanding as clouds, because the clouds result from the sun's evaporation of water from the ocean. So the sun expands as sunshine, the sun expands as clouds, the sun expands as rain that comes from the clouds. Not that everything is the same.
These are material examples. But
well, what do you want? If you want a spiritual example, Krishna expands as Balaram and the Purusha avatars, and he expands as the living entities. But because that's a little far away, I'm giving a material example.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This Veda Stuti is thus the original instruction regarding the relationship existing between the living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The highest platform of realization for the living entity is the attainment of devotional life. One cannot be engaged in devotional life or Krishna consciousness unless one is fully free from material contamination. Narayan Rishi informed Narad Muni that the essence of all the Vedas and Vedic literatures, namely the 4 Vedas, the Upanishads, the Puranas, and the Vedanta Sutra, is to render transcendental loving servants to the Lord. In this connection, Narayan Rishi has used his one particular word, rasa. In devotional service, this ras is the medium or the basic principle for the exchange of loving dealings between the Lord and a living entity. Ras is also described in the Vedas, raso vai saha. The Supreme Lord is a reservoir of all pleasure. All the Vedic literatures, including the Puranas, the Vedas, and Upanishads, and the Vedanta Sutra, teach the living entities how to attain the stage of rasa. The Bhagavatam also says that the statements in the Mahapurana, Srimad Bhagavatam, constitute the essence, ras, of all Vedic literature. Nigama kalpa taror galitam phalam. The Bhagavatam is the essence of the ripened fruit of the tree of the Vedic literature. We understand that with the breathing of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there issued forth the 4 Vedas, namely the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda. And also the histories like the Mahabharata and all the Puranas, which are considered to be the history of the world. The Vedic histories, like the Puranas and the Mahabharata, are called the 5th Veda.
There are those who say, no, we only accept the Shrutis, the 4 Vedas, including the Upanishads. But in the Vedas themselves, in the Chandogya Upanishad, it's said that the Itihasas and Puranas are the 5th Veda. So they have to be accepted also. Therefore, one of the aparads, nama-aparads, is to blaspheme Vedic literature or the literature in pursuance of the Vedic version. the Shrutis, the Smritis, Puranas.
The 28 verses of the Veda Stuti are to be considered the essence of all Vedic knowledge. The four Kumaras and all the other authorized sages know perfectly that devotional service in Krishna consciousness is the essence of all Vedic literatures, and they preach this on different planets traveling in outer space. It is stated herein that such sages, including Narad Muni, hardly ever travel on land. They perpetually travel in space. Sages like Narad Muni and the Kumaras travel throughout the universe to educate the conditioned souls that their business in the world is not that of sense gratification, but of reinstating themselves in their original position of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is stated in several places that the living entities are like sparks of the fire, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is like the fire itself. If the sparks somehow or other fall out of the fire, they lose their natural illumination. Thus, it is ascertained that the living entities come into this material world exactly as sparks fall from a great fire. The living entity wants to imitate Krishna and tries to lord it over material nature in order to enjoy sense gratification. Thus, he forgets his original position and his illuminating power. His spiritual identity is extinguished. However, if a living entity takes to Krishna consciousness, he is reinstated in his original position. To preach this process of devotional service, sages and saints like Narad and the Kumaras travel all over the universe, educating people and increasing their disciples. Their aim is that all the conditioned souls may be educated to revive their original consciousness or Krishna consciousness, and thus gain relief from the miserable conditions of material life. Sri Narad Muni is a Naishtika brahmachari. There are 4 types of brahmacharis. The first is called Savitra, which refers to a brahmachari who, after initiation and the sacred thread ceremony, must observe at least 3 days of celibacy. The next is called Prajapatya, which refers to a brahmachari who strictly observes celibacy for at least 1 year after initiation. The next is called Brahma brahmachari, which refers to a brahmachari who observes celibacy for the time of initiation up to the time of the completion of his study of the Vedic literature. The next stage is called Naishtika, which refers to a brahmachari who is celibate throughout his whole life. Out of these, the first 3 are Upakurvana, which means that the brahmachari can marry later, after the brahmachari period is over. The Naishtika brahmachari, however, is completely reluctant to have any sex life. Therefore, the Kumaras and Narad are known as Naishtika brahmacharis. Such brahmacharis are called Viravrata because their vow of celibacy is as heroic as the vows of the Kshatriyas. The brahmachari system of life is especially advantageous in that it increases the power of memory and determination. It is specifically mentioned in this connection that because Narada was a Naishtika brahmachari, he could remember whatever he heard from his spiritual master and would never forget it. One who can remember everything perpetually is called a Shrutidhar. A Shrutidhar brahmachari can repeat verbatim all that he has heard without notes and without reference to books. The great sage Narad has this qualification, and therefore, having taken instructions from Narayana Rishi, he is engaged in propagating the philosophy of devotional service all over the world. Because such great sages can remember everything, they are thoughtful, self-realized, and completely fixed in the service of the Lord.
Brahmachari Gurukule Asandanta Gurur Hitam. Everyone, especially the children from the higher sections of society, should be educated in the principles of self-control, and specifically they should they should be educated to refrain from sex life. So the brahmacharis, as described here, they either for 3 days or for a year, or to the completion of their studies, or throughout their life, they remain brahmachari. The modern so-called education destroys the lives of the students by encouraging one way or another sex life. And these days, they're even encouraging homosexual sex, whatever suits you, whatever you think you are, that's fine. We celebrate everyone's gender identity, whatever it may be, and under one way or another, we celebrate sex. This is Atmahano Jana. This is spiritually suicidal. The real Vedic training encourages brahmachari life. Even if one is later to marry, that brahmachari training will be so valuable for him. Prabhupada one time was describing this. Prabhupada has in various places described one may be brahmachari for his whole life, or for a year, or for at least one day. And someone once said, one of our sannyasis repeated that. And someone asked him, what's the use of remaining brahmachari just for one day? So he replied, one day he'll look back and say, that was the happiest day of my life. Any questions? Mm-hmm.
I'd like to ask about the purport. After it's different purport, not connected with.
A little loud.
It's not connected with the purport which we are reading now. So Prabhupada is writing, after giving up this material body, such a devotee comes to me. After leaving the material body, the perfect devotee takes birth from the womb of a gopi on a planet where Krishna's pastimes are going on. This may be in this universe or in another universe. This statement is found in Ujjvala Nilamani, which is commented upon by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. When a devotee becomes perfect, he is transferred to a universe where Krishna's pastimes are taking place. Yeah.
Where are you reading from, by the way?
So this is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 2397. Okay. Yeah, so my question is, we should go back to Krishna straight after we...
This is the method.
Yeah.
That rather than immediately going to Goloka Vrindavan, the living entity who attains devotional perfection is transferred to a place where Krishna is performing his pastimes here in the material world. That's as good as the spiritual world, but he's transferred to Vrindavan in the material world, apparently in the material world, and Prabhupada said trained up, and then after that. Is that okay?
Yeah, so it means like theoretically there will be someone who would attain perfection, but in next and last life, or it will be, he would attain perfection and he will be trained up in material realm, but he will be, or she, whatever,
material realm, actually spiritual realm within the material world.
Yeah, like that. Mm-hmm.
Then the next birth is, or it's no birth actually, but then it goes back to God.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Maharaj, this Naishtika Brahmachari term, So just like we say that one, even if he belongs from a dog eater family, one, even if person belongs there, if he chants Hare Krishna, then so similarly this Naistik Brahmachari, like just like hippies, they were living unregulated life. But as soon as they met Prabhupada and they got initiated, they followed, many of them are following Brahmachari life afterwards. So it can be used for them also.
No. Naistik Brahmachari means his whole life there's no sex. That's Naistik Brahmachari. So one can become Brahmachari from the time of course, in the Vedic system, as we find here, they would remain brahmachari for 3 days, or they would remain brahmachari for a year. It was understood that before that there was no sex. Then they refrain from sex for some time. Then they can marry. Now everything is a mess. People have sex from early, the boys have sex from an early age, and there's no brahmachari training. Everyone's a cat or a dog. But even the cats and dogs or human beings who are on the level of cats and dogs can be trained. And then they're trained to refrain from sex life as brahmacharis for some time or for the rest of their life. But Naistik Brahmachari, that's like Narad Muni, like the Kumars, from their whole life, there's no sex. Shukadeva Goswami.
Bhakti Siddhanta.
Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Those who adopt the brahmachari life later are not called Naistik Brahmachari. They're glorious, but the term is reserved for those who've never had sex in their life. Anything else?
Thus the sage, Narad, after hearing from his spiritual master, Narayan Rishi, became completely realized. He became established in the truth, and he became so happy that he offered prayers to Narayan Rishi. Narad Muni addressed Narayan Rishi as an incarnation of Krishna, and specifically addressed him as a supreme well-wisher of the conditioned souls. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that Lord Krishna descends in every millennium just to give protection to his devotees and to annihilate to the non-devotees. Narayan Rishi, being an incarnation of Krishna, is also addressed as the well-wisher of the conditioned souls. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, everyone should know that there is no well-wisher like Krishna. Everyone should understand that Lord Krishna is the supreme well-wisher of everyone and should take shelter of him. In this way, one can become completely confident and satisfied, knowing that he has someone who is able to give him all protection. Krishna himself, as incarnations and his plenary expansions, are all supreme well-wishers of the conditioned souls. But Krishna is the well-wisher even of the demons, for he gave salvation to all the demons who came to kill him in Vrindavan. Therefore, Krishna's welfare activities are absolute, for whether he annihilates a demon or gives protection to a devotee, the result of his activities is one and the same. It is said that the demon Putana was elevated to the same position as that of Krishna's mother. When Krishna kills a demon, the demon is supremely benefited, as much as a pure devotee is benefited by always being protected by the Lord. Narad Muni, after offering respects to Narayan Rishi, his spiritual master, went to the ashram of Vyasadeva, his disciple. Being properly received by Vyasadeva in his ashram and seated very comfortably, Narad Muni narrated the entire story of what he heard from Narayan Rishi. In this way, Shukadeva Goswami informed Maharaj Parikshit of the answers to his questions regarding the essence of Vedic knowledge and what is considered to be the ultimate goal in the Vedas. The supreme goal of life is to achieve the transcendental blessings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus become engaged in a loving service of the Lord. One should follow in the footsteps of Shukadeva Goswami and all the other Vaishnavas in disciplic succession and should pay respectful obeisances unto Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari. The four sects of Vaishnava disciplic succession, namely the Madhava Sampradaya, the Ramanuja Sampradaya, the Vishnu Swami Sampradaya, and the Nimbharka Sampradaya, in pursuance of all Vedic conclusions, agree that one should surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vedic literatures are divided into two parts, Shrutis and the Smritis.
Mm-hmm. Someone say something.
The Shrutis are the four Vedas, Rik, Sama, Atharva, and Yajur. And the Upanishads and the Smritis are the Puranas and the Itihasas, like the Mahabharata, which includes the Bhagavad Gita. The conclusion of all these is that one should know Shri Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Parama Purusha, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, under whose superintendence material nature works. For creation, maintenance, and annihilation, the Supreme Lord incarnates into three: Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva, after manifesting the material cosmos. All of these take charge of the three qualities of material nature, but the ultimate direction is in the hand of Lord Vishnu. The complete activities of material nature under the three modes are conducted under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Maya Yakshena, and in the Vedas, Sa Akshata. The atheistic Shankyate philosophers, Shankyate philosophers will of course offer their arguments that the material cosmic manifestation is due to Prakriti and Purusha, material nature and the living entity, or the material cause and the effective cause. But Krishna is the cause of all causes. He is the cause of both the material and the effective causes. Prakriti and Purusha are not the ultimate cause. Superficially, it appears that a child is born due to the combination of the father and mother, but the ultimate cause of both the father and the mother is Krishna. He is therefore the original cause, or the cause of all causes, as confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. Both the Supreme Lord and the living entities enter into the material nature. The Supreme Lord Krishna, by one of his plenary expansions, manifests as Karana Dhakshay Vishnu, Mahavishnu, the gigantic form lying in the causal ocean. Then, from that gigantic form of Mahavishnu, Garbhodhakshay Vishnu expands and enters into every universe. From him, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva expand. Vishnu, as Kshirodakshay enters into the hearts of all living entities, as well as into all material elements, including the atom. The Brahma Samhita says, Andhantara shta paramanu chayantara shtam. The Lord is within this universe and also within every atom. The living entity has a small material body taken in various species and forms, and similarly, the whole universe is but the material body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This body is described in the Shastras as Virat Rup. As the individual living entity maintains his particular body, the Supreme Personality of Godhead maintains the whole cosmic manifestation, creation, entering within it. As soon as the individual living entity leaves the material body, the body is immediately annihilated. And similarly, as soon as Lord Vishnu leaves the cosmic manifestation, everything is annihilated. Therefore, only when the individual living entity surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is his liberation from material existence possible. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. Surrendering unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and nothing else is therefore the cause of liberation. How the living entity becomes liberated from the modes of material nature after surrendering unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is illustrated by the example of a man sleeping within a room. When a man is sleeping, everyone sees that he is present within the room, but actually the man himself is not within that body. For while sleeping, a man forgets his bodily existence, although others may see that this body is present. Similarly, a liberated person engaged in devotional service to the Lord may be seen by others to be engaged in household duties of the material world. But since his consciousness is fixed in Krishna, he does not live within this world. His engagements are different, exactly as a sleeping man's engagements are different from his bodily engagements. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that a devotee engaged full time in the transcendental loving service of the Lord has already surpassed the influence of the three modes of material nature. He is already situated on the Brahman platform and is in a transcendental realm, although he appears to be living within the body or within the material world. In this connection, Srila Rupa Goswami states in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that the person whose only desire is to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead may be situated in any condition in the material world, but he is to be understood as Jivan Mukta. That is to say, he is to be considered liberated while living within the body or the material world. The conclusion, therefore, is that a person fully engaged in Krishna consciousness is a liberated person. Such a person actually has nothing to do with his material body or the material world. Those who are not in Krishna consciousness are called karmis and jnanis, and they hover on the bodily mental platforms and thus are not liberated. This situation is called kaivalya nirashta joni. But a person situated on a transcendental platform is freed from the repetition of birth and death. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter. Simply by knowing the transcendental nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, one becomes free from the chains of a repetition of birth and death. And after quitting his present body, he goes back home, back to Godhead. This is the conclusion of all the Vedas. And thus, after understanding the prayers offered by the personified Vedas, one should surrender unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 87th chapter of Krishna, Prayers of the Personified Vedas.
So there we have it, Srila Prabhupada's tour de force summary of Krishna consciousness, the essence of the Vedic knowledge, in which Krishna is accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the impersonal effulgence of Krishna is secondary. Srila Prabhupada presents with authority that the purpose of human life is to surrender to Krishna, and in this way become reinstated in his devotional service, and that will make one's life perfect. So congratulations on having completed the study of this formidable chapter, the most formidable chapter of Krishna book, deeply philosophical and involving so many examples and arguments, and really surveying the entire territory of the Vedic knowledge. And bringing us to the conclusion that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the Supreme Controller, and we're all his servants. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It's on my own, I can't do anything, but by your association, we're able to take on and complete this study of Krishna book, or to relish this study of Krishna's pastimes as presented by Srila Prabhupada. We all learn. The speaker learns, the audience learns. We all benefit by coming together and hearing and discussing these topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. All right, shall we?
One question.
One question.
In this last paragraph, Prabhupada is saying Krishna manifests in Brahma and this Shiva and Vishnu. So we see Brahma is like Vivanansh, like it's a living entity.
Yes, Brahma is generally a living entity. But when there's no one competent to take the post, Krishna may fill it himself. But otherwise, Brahma is generally one of the Jiva souls.
And Shiva position of Shiva?
Shiva's position is special. He's not one of the Jivas, and he's not Vishnu Tattva. He's in between. One more? Two more.
So in the conclusion, it said Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in the spiritual world, in Goloka Dham, people are not aware that Krishna is God because of Yoga Maya. They're making the connection to Krishna Lila. Lord Chaitanya is actually aware that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. So my question is, in the spiritual world, is there the Chaitanya Lila? Do we have a connection to Lord Chaitanya?
That's described in purport to Brahma Samhita, that there's a portion of Goloka Vrindavan where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is performing his pastimes with all his associates. There's a mysterious place there where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is performing his pastimes.
Which verse is that? Which purport can we find?
Oh, I don't know where. It's in Brahma Samhita, in the commentary on Brahma Samhita. Might even be the first verse. I don't remember. Yes. Switch.
Hare Krishna. So from the last paragraph, two questions. One is in the beginning of the paragraph. In this connection, Srila Rupa Goswami states in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that the person whose only desire is to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead may be situated in any condition in the material world, but he is to be understood as Jivan Mukta. So, can you give Maharaj examples of any condition?
Of?
Any condition. Basically, someone is totally surrendered to Krishna.
Svargarpa Varga Narakeshvapi Tulyartha Darshana. Narada Muni goes to the hellish planets, he goes to the heavenly planets. He can go anywhere. One can render devotional service. Let me think of some examples. The Hanuman rendered devotional service in the form of a monkey. Arjuna rendered service on the battlefield. The gopis are rendering service in the Vrindavan forest. There are so many different circumstances, different relationships with Krishna. But here, Iha yasya harer dasya karmana manasa gira nikalashvapyavastasu Jivan Mukta Suchate. Anyone who renders service to Krishna with body, mind, and words full-heartedly, even though situated in the material world, is Jivan Mukta, liberated soul.
basically it refers to not ideal material situation. It refers to not ideal material situation.
It doesn't require an ideal material situation. One may be in a very happy situation, very miserable situation, rich, poor. The Bahulashva was serving as a great king, and Shruti was serving as a simple Brahmin. But they were equally appreciated by the Lord.
And the second thing is this famous verse from Bhagavad Gita, Janma Karma Chame Divyam. Can you elaborate on this? What actually means to know Krishna? Because
I'm going to save that for another time, commenting on Janma Karma Chame Divyam, because we want to keep something like the schedule. So, yeah. Okay. Kirtan. Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.